Thank you, Mr. Jha, for a good introductory set of remarks. As you rightly said that transmission has become a very complex exercise now. Of course, transmission planning has always been very challenging. In our own time for the last 30, 40 years, we have seen how we changed from a state transmission system to regional transmission system and from regional transmission system to the national transmission system. each change, together with expansion that was happening on the generation side, supply side, was indeed a big challenge. I think the type of exercise that India has gone through in last particularly 20, 30 years is unprecedented type of exercise. Exercise is an unprecedented exercise, and we have succeeded. Of course, there are concerns, and that those concerns will be there and they need to be discussed. But so far as this emergence of renewable as a phenomenon in India in last 10 plus years is concerned, that has made the exercise even more complex, very complex. We have solar systems coming at a very fast pace, and the type of figures that we are talking in terms of gigawatt, now no longer we are talking in megawatt, now we are talking gigawatt. Till the turn of the century, last century, we were less than 100,000 megawatts. So now gigawatt is appearing smaller. So now everything is in terms of, like Mr. Jha mentioned, in carved area, something like 50, 60,000 megawatt or 50, 60 gigawatt in the Khavda plus in that area put together. You will have the solar power system coming up. Jaisalmer is another area where large capacity is likely to come. And on the top of it, we have the lead time. And the lead time of, as you all know, the solar system is short in terms of generation capacity being hooked to the grid, and the lead time of transmission is entirely different. And it is becoming more and more challenging. So as a result, things have become too difficult for transmission planners. Do we reduce the pace of generation in solar? Is an issue. Or do we do something that we continue with the pace, even further accelerate and yet handle the transmission issue adequately? That is a major point to consider. And on the top of it now, we also have another set of development, which is a good development. And that is, we are also trying to do decentralized distributed rural energy in rural area. Almost all the states in the country, and rightly so, they have gone with the planning of 2 megawatt to 5 megawatt, sometimes even less, in rural India, and they will have their local system. So I can only sympathize with the people who are planning, because everything is touched upon, everything is planned, everything is getting into execution mode, but one is not certain at what pace those things will happen insofar as decentralized distributed rural energy is concerned. But that has a bearing. If you did not have this decentralized, then you will have national grid, and from national grid you get into the state grid, and from the state grid in the usual manner you get into 33 kV and all that. So that was the mode of supply. But this solar technology gives us an advantage that we can have very extensive formulation, very extensive planning of rural India to be supplied with highly decentralized distributed rural system, solar system. same supply. So dynamically, how do we factor that in? We have to simulate the condition, what will happen in next 3 years, simulate the condition, what will happen in next 5 years, next 10 years, and then also try to see how best we take care of the larger concentration of generation in areas like Khavda, areas like Jaisalmer, where tens of gigawatt of capacity would be coming in next 5-10 years and at very short gestation period. This is a tough task. And really, I do not know how the transmission system would cater to this. And frankly and candidly, that exercise has not generated a conclusion that we will be able to cope with it or we will not be able to cope with it. And to cope with it, what do we do? I am also told in certain generation area on solar system, already sort of backing down is being sort of implemented. You have a supply that can be more. You have, let's say, 500 megawatt or 1,000 megawatt, and backing down. And it is not necessarily on account of the demand, but also on account of transmission inadequacy, transmission adequacy to cope with the type of generation that will happen. This phenomenon of something that has emerged in the last few months, this is likely to be accentuated. This is likely to increase further. That will put, so that two contradictory situations are there. Do we need to take care of the massive expansion that the pace at which it's happening in concentrated areas, and in what manner we take? And how do we necessarily factor in the decentralized distributed generation in rural India, about which you cannot say with certainty that what amount of that capacity would be only on local transmission system. So this is one set of planning process. Second set of challenge that is coming is already a detailed exercise has been done, and as I was mentioning, we are going to discuss this in a few days now on about the study that has been done on the cost of transmission. Even without this study, a number of seminars that I attended, number of informal discussions that I attended, people did have a feeling that on transmission, the cost is becoming quite high. Are we overdoing it or we are inadequate? That is another. If we are overdoing it, that how do we handle the cost of transmission? And how do we keep the power cost under control? So that is another set. The execution challenge was always there, but that execution challenge for the simple reason that the magnitude of expansion is high and the gestation period that we expect is going to be lower. That has put another challenge on execution. Right of way was always an issue, but that right of way everywhere is becoming a more acute problem. Quite often, number of projects where huge investments are being made, maybe 70-80% of capex has been spent, but for the last 10-15%, you wait for months or sometime a year or two, just because of this right of way issue getting not resolved, and therefore your IDC also increases, capex increases, your cost increases, and whole investment assumptions that were made get into problem. So these are another set of execution problem that are happening. On technology side, I have been discussing quite often that to handle this issue, why do we not have, in a limited way, underground cable system so that right of way problem is partially reduced? And major technological changes that need to happen in the overall transmission system in terms of tower design, character of tower, in terms of cabling or conductors. That part, I would say that to cope with the type of expansion that India is going to experience, whether adequate research technology development is happening or not, and I wouldn't say I'm not critical of it, but whether that has an answer to be there in time to come. So there are a number of issues that are associated today As I said in the beginning, transmission planning was always a complex exercise, but for the reason that we just now outlined and Mr. Jha also outlined, I think this is going to be a bigger problem. We should be quite seriously concerned about it. Overdoing or underdoing, not adequately taking care of this, or managing the pace or moderating the pace of generation in certain cases so that this problem is appropriately handled and the cost is kept under control. These are some of the issues that we will like to hear from our experts on the subject, and then we will also discuss among the participants to come to a certain set of conclusions, which will definitely be forwarded to the concerned authorities. Thank you again, once again, on behalf of the India Energy Forum, that you are participating on such an important and very critical issue. It is timely that we come out with some conclusions and some recommendations. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Jha. This has been very absorbing session, in fact. And since we had combined both planning and execution, so I mean, obviously, we went into too much of detail, which is required. Because the challenge is that you need to do transmission fast to cope with the fast developing solar, and we have a longer gestation period that we are faced with. So really, on both the sides, we have to gear up. On planning side, we have to gear up in the manner that it is better known what is going to happen where, so that transmission planning is also aligned to that. So one of the suggestions that came during discussion, Mr. Ajay Shankar made, like road and highways and all that, of course, that is a very good thinking, that do the transmission in advance. But do the transmission in advance would also require a good degree of planning. So for example, today in the area like Jaisalmer or Khavda, when we find that we have generation coming faster, but transmission is a little bit slow, or I think a presentation was made by one of the eminent speakers that something like RE power, something like 50, I didn't believe that out of 100 gigawatt, 50 gigawatt is stranded. That is what he said, if I understood him correctly. I think there is some degree of stranding may be there, but out of 100 gigawatt, 50 gigawatt is stranded. I think that sort of situation, I didn't believe it may be there, but maybe he may be right. But that apart, this issue of gap between generation coming faster and transmission lagging behind will go on cumulatively getting added up. There is no doubt about it. At least now, if we know that 500 gigawatt has to come by 2030 or 31 or 32, we still have a few years, and there should be greater degree of clarity about transmission to evacuate this. A very important point came at the planning stage, that a transmission planning cannot be totally linked to the generation capacity. If we advise or if we ensure that battery energy storage or pump storage or any other, or even your concentrated power or any other such a storage system or hydrogen, whichever is the backup for the solar not being available during evening or night hours, then we will know that if 30,000 megawatt is coming in an area, how much of that 30,000 megawatt would be required for storage, creating a storage capacity, and how much will during daytime will have to be evacuated from there. Now, that degree of planning, I am sure Central City Authority and others are doing it. I am not aware, but that type of planning in a very precise manner, if it is put in place in advance, then planning of what is to be done on transmission And starting that process can begin much earlier than generation capacity, or at least coinciding with generation capacity. Today we have done 100,000 megawatt, we still have to do 400,000 megawatt, then subsequent batches of 500,000 megawatt. So at least that type of planning process can definitely. In that, I made a point that we should also factor in what is going to happen to the consumption profile when this distributed generation in rural area comes up. So these 2-3 things put together, the planning process and starting of transmission line, they can be integrated in a manner that the degree of challenge or complexity of challenge, if not totally eliminated, can be definitely be reduced. And definitely you don't need to plan equal to the capacity of solar system in an area. You need to plan transmission for a capacity which is lower than the capacity there, because quite a bit of that capacity essentially will go for the storage system. So that and similarly, quite a bit of a capacity in the system will be needed also for the local area in different states, and there we have a different system of generation, transmission, distribution. So I think that's a very important thing, though I do not disagree with Ajay that if we could put transmission planning, just a minute, transmission system quite ahead of the solar generation, that would be a good thing. I think then this session went in detail, sessions went on in detail on execution side. Execution side is a major story. But just before that, in one of these discussions, similar discussions, I was told that even after tariff-based competitive bidding is done, everything is known who is going to be the developer, and the developer makes preparation in advance. There is a process, I suppose, in the regulatory commission which takes as much as 7, 8, 9 months. So that part between planning and tariff-based competitive bidding and commencement of construction, how best we should minimize that process, because when we are now talking in terms of this challenge, which is really a good challenge, then we should not be luxuriously scheduling our activities, paperwork activities. When tariff-based competitive bidding has been done, and in the generation we had said that regulatory commission will adopt that tariff which comes out of competition, what is there for the regulatory commission to sit if it is true? I am not saying it is true, but this point was raised in one such discussion that it is taking as much as 7, 8, 9 months. So I think, Mr. Jha, you will perhaps find it out, and then we will definitely address a request letter to the regulatory commission that this is a crisis situation, and more bigger crisis is likely to come because transmission will be behind. Then came the execution part. In execution part, we are very badly placed in terms of supply. The amount of things that are going to happen and the way our manufacturing sector is geared is awfully out of place. So it is not only the execution agencies that is out of place, it's also the supply chain is out of place. So I think we will have to very well in advance interact with, I think, the government system, the developer system, they must interact with the manufacturing agencies, must interact with the execution agency. I think in transmission, we have lost some of the good agencies which used to be in the past, at least I was aware of, but now everywhere we are finding any amount of lacuna in the execution. And a good session came on mechanizing. I have been raising this point as to why transmission tower to erection to your stringing, everything is being done the way it was being done 50 years ago. What is the sort of mechanization that is happening? Absolutely, there is no mechanization. Absolutely, it was a delight to hear that something is being done. Definitely, we need to interact with the contracting agency, execution agency, manpower skill that was discussed. These are all important things. I would definitely feel that another session by us on execution. Planning we have discussed, we can still discuss with Central City Authority, CTU and others who are dealing with this. But then execution is a major issue. Transmission being done in 4 years' time is a luxurious schedule. It worked well in the past when thermal power is also coming in 4 years, hydropower coming in 6 years. Now when solar coming so fast, and even if you expedite the planning process, this type of luxurious schedule will not do. Whatever is possible to minimize this, and in that skill development, technicians and others, all these things will come. See, what is happening is that when you talk to the people, they try to put the buck on somebody else. Contracting agencies, if they don't have to develop skilled people, who will develop? They need to develop. Similarly, your supplying agency, if they don't have to interact as to as if take APC contract, supply also everything, then naturally they have to develop. So I think we are trying to pass the buck on somebody else will solve these problems. When the work comes, contracting agencies also have to make money, supplying agencies also have to make money. But to make that money, what preparations are needed, everybody is trying to put the responsibility on somebody else. So I think one will have to be candid where the problem belongs, and preparation will have to be done. It is doable. It is doable with a storage system, reducing the quantum of supply that will come from there, and with the type of regulatory thing that a point that I made, it is possible that manufacturers and equipment supplier and construction agency, they gear up. It is not very difficult, but at the same time, if it is going to be a gap, we will also have to see how in planning we take care of that so that unnecessary stranded capacity does not result in, because we are also going to have a session in maybe a week or two on transmission cost. Transmission cost has also emerged as a subject. Though I do not want to load this with my thought because I am not aware, but some perception is coming up that is transmission becoming too costly. So I think with these, this session has been very good, and thank you very much.